Chapter 16. The Devotee. I returned to the Master's Dej. My mind was on fire with the day's events. Inside, it was quiet, and the Master and Mediha, the girl child who arrived with Bren, were seated facing one another. Bren had taught me her name. She and the Master had not moved for almost 2 days. I was jealous. Who was this girl who occupied him so much, so captured his attention? I wondered. Still, I could not help being fascinated by this mysteriously silent play between them, their regard and recognition of one another. Her attention for Master Paen seemed unbreakable. I wanted to speak with the Master, but I sensed he was not interested in my chatter tonight. He was only interested in the girl, and that I took care of Bren. As I ate, I thought about our mysterious guests, and then fell asleep. In dream, the tree was now a full-grown baobab, its trunk thickening before my eyes. It filled the pit that was the crater and began to grow tall, slowly reaching upward into the skies. I could see through the ground as if it were transparent, or as if I had a kind of oracular vision of the tree's roots digging deep into soil, pressing downward, expanding, penetrating rock and going further down into wet firmament. On the gray trunk was a prominent mark like a bird with its wings spread. Its long tail feathers hung straight down, and beneath each wing was a circle. I looked up into the purple sky and noted the 2 full pale moons shining on the growing tree. In the morning, the Master and Mediha were still meditating, perfectly still. I was bothered by this, threatened, but I held to my instructions to take care of Bren. I returned to the crash site where Bren was hard at work. He had ripped a device out of his ship's cabin and had the essential parts strewn over a makeshift table that used to be a wing. The device, resting on top, was another radio. I asked him how it worked. This radio is stronger, he said. Yeah, stronger signal. The more I was around Bren, the more inquisitive I became. I wanted to know how everything that surrounded him worked, and enthusiastically I struggled with the concepts. I watched Bren tinkering, and from time to time he would stop to wink at me. He told me he would travel up the mountains to the east, that he would bring the radio and get a better signal. The Master insisted that I go with him. We made the trip in 4 days, Darlian coming with us. We traveled uphill, avoided being seen by war parties to where the air was still chilled. Bren said this place was clear enough of the initial mountain ranges that could have blocked his transmission, but still, no one answered. Bren looked upward into the sky. He took in the great expanse of the mountains before him, its endless jaggedness fading into the purple to gray horizon. He sighed. Falcon ein Bergnest. Hörst du mich? Ich habe das Paket. Ich frage nach 9 Rendezvous-Koordinaten. Hörst du mich? Falcon 1 to Mountain Nest, do you copy? I have the package. I'm asking for the rendezvous coordinates. Do you read? Mysteriously, and in the short time of hearing Brent speak, weeks, I somehow began to understand more of the words. Quickly, by a growing obsession, I was learning the language of his homeland, a place called Mountain Nest, or at least I thought then. We traveled back to Arkaya over the next 4 days. Along the way, I observed Bren seeming to open. The edge that seemed to motivate him to move at a frenzied pace softened. He now rode the course given rather than balking, taking in the deep green silence as we slipped through shaded passages in the jungle, past the dust particle-infested light rays that pierced the vine canopies and glowed against the waxy leaves of plants on the jungle floor. Darlian and I led him through our favorite places, enchanting Bren with the beauty beyond Arkaya. As Darlian and I rekindled our love for wandering the land as brothers, Bren relaxed atop the large black mera that Darlian loaned him. Bren's loose leaves filling with the gentle winds that whispered promises of rain. He looked less ragged now, stronger as he held the reins. He noted my observing him, and he grinned heartily. Temporarily, at least, what haunted him had been exorcised. When we camped along the way, Darlian and I told Brent stories about our people, the Khoorhani and the Mayak. He listened intently, and as I translated for Darlian, the two seemed to become friendlier. Despite this, it seemed to me Darlian looked on Bren with suspicion. It would take weeks, months perhaps, before Bren surrendered and became Khoorhani enough, his fine hair becoming matted and braided and his face painted by Sasocheda. His foreign clothes were being christened by Genaya's unforgiving elements, so much so that he wore less of them and one day donned a kaftan given to him by Paen. And Bren's tongue loosened up when speaking our language too, so much so that Darlian began to share meals and hunt alone with Bren. Still, we did not learn much about him. He seemed a walking secret. His emotional body encrypted the cipher thrown away a long time ago. He slept roughly, was disturbed in his dreaming, and seemed to look at me with an odd sense of shame. Paen only encouraged me to take greater care with him, to win him over. So, we adventured deep into the jungles as if the abandon of our early years had never left. Bren showed us how to fire his advanced weapon, the G-Riot. We brought him to outskirt villages to attend sunset drum circles beneath tall trees, where he surprised us with his own wildness, and at times even tried to teach us a song for all of us to sing. He was inclined to our various ails, and his drunkenness seemed to exorcise his demons with great abandon, throwing his arm around my shoulder, laughing. He wished to tell me his story, but having drunk too much, he would only slur and then nod off. Behind his many veils, however, I knew Bren regarded me well. Word of him spread, but it did not matter, for he was not Mayak. The days were spent on green hillsides beneath the splendor of yellow sun as gentle winds caressed the manes of our meras. Wearily, one day after coming back from the east with Bren, I entered the master's dish. He was seated before his low table. He smiled at me and gestured for me to come in. Knowing the bond was strong between Bren and me, Master Paen said, "It is time. Take him to Minot. See if he can help us deliver them beyond the highlands to the plains." "Master, do you know who the girl and Bren are? Why are they together?" I asked. Paen sighed and smiled gently. She is my devotee, and he is her deliverer, he said. Now it is time for her to return home. I was speechless. What did all of that mean? Where was her home? But I could not ask, as I simply melted in the peace that was Paen, who was shining now, his simple calm and graceful grin a gift. I was happy to be back home. Darlian decided to head back to Arkaya. My heart darkening with his decision, I could not persuade him to stay. Missing his wife, he left for Kushaiti. I knew my brother would return to the war. I waved to him as he and Whitemane disappeared into the jungle. I went into the master's dish, into the main room. In the back corner, the girl was seated on a small blue cushion, quiet, still, a straight line and posture. Sasojada, after some time, rose from where he was seated, bowed to Paen, and left the room for the evening. As days progressed, I could not get around my own edginess, a certain weight held within Paen's gaze, a seriousness that made it so I could not escape it, this edge. I could not help but want to skulk by him as he sat with Medea most nights. I was terrified of what I suspected he wanted to say to me. Still a rebellious child, I was committed to not hearing what he had to say, but rather to persistently insulate myself with my private interests. I busied myself with Bren, with listening to his marvelous stories and examining his devices. I was simply avoiding the bigger picture, the massive story arc that was being set against the backdrop of my life. In Dream, the tree was so high now that its branches seemed to fill the entire sky. The moons, like two silver eyes in the twilight sky. The roots, I could see, had completely set to the lowest of the low depths, and curled, wrapped like fingers around a massive diamond in the core of the world. I was dwarfed by the great tree and its symbol of the bird. Over the two moons was a massive etching in the bark. Finally, one quiet evening, I turned a corner from within my private section of the Dij and I ran straight into the master. We stood face to face, for I had walked directly into his gaze. I could not run or hide or fail to acknowledge the fact that something serious indeed was going to be put to me. He saw me tremble, and his eyes softened a small bit as he took my shaking and sweating hand and sat me down beside him at the table. He sat ever so quiet, waiting for me to calm down. "You are my son, Jeshibian," he said so kindly, removing all of my resistance. I breathed. "I love you, Master. I know you do. And I love you too. What I have to ask you may be difficult for you, but I must ask." "I will do it, beloved," I said, shaking still, but knowing that I would do anything for him. "You must go with them," Paen said. His words lanced me. But I knew this would come, and that was why I avoided him. I did not ever want to leave him. "Oh," I sighed. "I need you to leave Arkaya, to leave Genaya entirely. You have to go wherever the Bane takes her. You must be with her." But Paen, she has Bren to guide her. He is a skilled... No. It has to be you, Jeshibian. You must never leave her side. What she represents, you must protect to the day you die. What she represents, you must nurture, care for, feed, and have the utmost love and affection for. You must be with her. She is the child of your sadhana, and that of the all in all. She is our victory. She is what you are to live up to and to turn to, as I do to Ashuta. But Master, I cried, I don't want to leave you. Oh, my boy, you cannot leave me, Jeshibian. You can only refuse me and establish your own independent and private kingdom, as did your father and the rest of your brothers. Have I done anything wrong? I cried, wheeling. No! I love you, my son. I love you. Now, be the warrior I raised. Take on this mission for me, will you? Can you not see the signs of the times, Jeshoya? Arkaya is done for, and I am done for here. In this way, at least. In the end, I agreed. I would do this. And I knew deep within that I could be happy to do this. I didn't, however, know where to start for sure, and so went back to my commiserating with Bren Edgewood, where we passed the time writing and learning each other's language. Still, I could not be engaged or distracted well enough from the zigzag line of my worriment that was my tendency. I cannot imagine a day passing without Paen in my life. Better to have been waiting in my father's gallows for the hangman to end my life than to live without my master. I could not help but feel rejected, disowned, the edges of the world coming uncomfortably into view, as now I must be something more without anything to point my way. Or rather, I had only this heart that the master believed in, and that now I had to believe in it for myself, to point the way. When I asked Bren, but in a vague manner, to disguise my actual intentions to come with him, how would one come to Paen if they could? I marked a protective discomfort in Bren as he presented the many reasons why it would be impossible. What I heard was that I'd be a burden to him. So without my really having asked him and his really not having rejected me, I simply left it there and hoped something else would present itself to me. Of course I worried, though, because I could think of no other way to follow Medea than through Bren Edgewood. I felt humiliated by my failure at this task before it had even been undertaken, seemingly unable to take charge of it. "Just pay attention," was all Paen said in response to my many complaints. The roots of the dream tree grew into deep cracks, thousands of strands of them, their numbers forcing the rock and the bowels of the world to crack into large pieces. The trauma caused the ground to shake, and the diamond that the tree grasped pushed in between the massive slabs that shifted over the orange magma within the core of the world. Under the enormous pressure of the world, the diamond released a great energy, tearing open my heart. I could see beyond the sky. The world rumbled, and I awoke sweating. Chapter 17, 700 Pounds of Gold.
From the Scrapbook of Joshua Khoorhani, Danish Thought Magazine, February edition interview with Milo Banksy C.
Okay. Oh, okay, you're right. Right. Welcome back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Danish Thought Magazine, the show. I'm your host, Hugh Trutel, and we're back from our break speaking with our esteemed guest, Milo Banksy, philosopher and astronomer and physicist. I believe we left off with a question from the audience. What was that? It was is tension phasing time travel, or is it something else, you asked? Chicken and the egg. It depends entirely on your point of view. Right. If you had asked me 40 years ago whether it was time travel, my answer, which would have been less guarded, would not be so tainted by all my reservations to believe in such a catastrophic possibility. A little bit dramatic for Christine. Okay. Well, why do you say catastrophic? Well, obviously, it is a matter of our survival that phasing is not time travel. Is it our future or our past that we are destroying? What was ever destroyed? It would be like the snake eating its tail. Hold on, love. Let him talk. Go ahead. We have 150 years of commerce built on the backbone of an anomalous constant. A bridge that could stop being a bridge should the universe hiccup and tear her scaffolding down. Should she do so, we cannot just pick up and rebuild the bridge because no one really knows upon what basis it actually exists. It is completely out of our control. Do you think that the best we can do in terms of Sten manifesting is that it's just there? Well, it is just there. I hope that it could be understood as arising as a portal of sorts. The Banks is a thing culture would rather Sten just remain there.
I detect an insult coming.
Our way of life depends on it. Our standard of living. Collectively, we are all just ostriches with our heads in the sand.
Good
Stupid pigs trudging our snouts in the soil in a blind frenzy.
Good luck getting people to rally around that, sir.
Well, Christina, to be fair, Milo Banksy, not being a political figure, really isn't trying to get anyone to rally around anything. Please do continue, sir.
You are such a kiss-ass, you.
For 1.5 centuries, we have taken for granted that when tension starliners achieve rift, they will appear right there in front of the marvelous green giant planet, Sten.
Well, I think the Khoorlrhani institutions have had these dilemmas you pose sorted for the 150 years of misunderstanding you'd like to assign us.
Really, is it your opinion that in 150 years science has not unlocked any of the secrets of the tension? Where is the evidence of our prowess in the matter? They are wonderful theories, but not time or energy enough to conduct any of the experiments. We only have assumptions. And there it is. So no, we are only better at exploiting the rift as it remains there. Navigation systems are clever in setting course, getting us back across without being jettisoned to unknown sectors of the galaxy, but still no one from any camp you care to listen to can answer the most important questions. Where or when is Sten?
Why does it matter? Why does it matter?
I think the question's rhetorical.
Oh, boy.
And in all seriously, you once were excited about the work of your family, the Banksys. To Christina's upset, would you say maybe you'd lost your mojo, maybe, or your optimism? I don't know. Seems sort of... You see, I am disturbed. I mean how you just pushed past me to that question. changed the subject without really considering what I was framing a moment ago. I say that 150 years ago, our entire culture based its future success on clay feet. Of a cosmic anomaly, and you ask me, where the glimmer in my eyes has got off to.
Oh, right, I'm sorry for that, sir.
Don't be sorry.
Let's talk about the rift.
Let's not be polite here.
Right.
Let's really examine things.
Okay.
The way you handle me is really just to illustrate my point that it does not seem to matter what science does, how many breakthroughs there are. The excitement for my forebears' work became a burden when I realized that breakthroughs did not matter, really, because the rest of the culture was not investigating a thing, only consuming.
Speak for yourself, you pompous ass.
You're going to get her riled up, sir.
We have a bad habit of accepting what is only when we think we can control it.
No, I agree with that, and apologies again.
No apologies necessary. It is quite all right, my boy. I don't mean to attack you personally. My point is just that our optimism and our pessimism are merely survival modes we enter into. You see, that little question of yours was, in my view, a form of protest that I should buy into the optimist's solution. This delusional idea that we are in control allows for the collective estimation of our potential to either plummet into the darkness, something uncommon for modern cultures such as us, or to rise into the stratosphere, where we are entitled to take what we want and think what we want about it, while we do the taking. You think I should express optimism as a bane?
Why not,
a
sir?
chore, really?
What is the problem with being proud of who you are?
By acting as a noble philosopher who sees Bane as the great godsend to all sentient creatures.
You show me the capital planet of a star system more worthy of my pride, Buster.
The lesson is this. We are learning there are bigger fishes out here.
Well, I do believe we fried all the scary fishes in the 60s, darling.
I think I see both your points. For the dimwits in our audience, Christine, you're referring to the Battle of Paen in 4166, and Mr. Banks, is he also referring to the appearance of the Trikes? Both the same story, but before we get into that, can we go back to the rift?
But you don't see. You want facts, right?
Right.
Control.
Yeah, right.
Milo Banksy tell of the facts, right?
What's the facts, yeah.
Okay, let's see. Is the effect of the rift temporal? Or is it interdimensionality? A doorway, per se? Is it the mating of natural tension fuel elements with our machinery, achieving a kind of astral projection initiated by AI systems? There are so many theories. I would only be guessing. I will say that I find it interesting that to phase requires quantum AI machines for a ship to return from the rift. To me, it suggests the need for intuition and memory of a pseudo-conscious self to find home. And without AI leaves a sea of mathematics and indecipherable code. All this said, though, the truth is that Sten is just there.
But
that
why?
is the only truth.
But why?
Tomorrow, it might not be there.
Well, that is there. It's obvious, sir.
Exactly. You want an authority that validates your taker's lifestyle and preserves the idea of it without threat of interruption of service. You want guarantees. I understand that. The answer I gave you is entirely unacceptable, of course, unless you are not wondering what is in it for you.
Well, with that, we're going to take another break, and we'll be back in about another 2 minutes.
My world seemed dwarfed by an unstoppable force that I could not conceptualize. Most nights my stomach ached with nervousness. The fireball in my dreams was a seed germinating. The plant growing at an alarming rate, the branches, almost an infestation, filling the skies of my destiny. The master worked by putting me on this edge, making me forget Archaea, and soon I felt dead to the world I knew. I only stayed with him. Archaea and the war was a distant background noise. Then, I learned that the city of Tanaga, under Botage's direction, was rumored to be planning an attack on Minot's gates in Archaea. It was also reported that Kamina was overrun by Unat Mayakta. My brother Seleth, who took Minot's command in the north, had been killed. Bren was with me when the messenger with the news left. His eyes were on me as I sat on a rock processing what I had heard. He squatted before me. "Were the two of you close?" he asked. "Not for a long time," I said, recalling how we battled each other in the snow. Bran seemed to sense where my mind was. Brothers always fight. Mine," he said, "put a rapier into me. Here." And he pulled up his shirt to show me the scar, a pink and twisted length along his side. "He didn't mean it," Bren said. Bren revealed that he had a family once but had lost them. He could say no more, only this tidbit to console me by sharing his pain. He changed the subject as I sat in silence, and he began to share more about himself. "Why, you're a spy?" I asked him when he described his job. Of sorts, an agent, at times, yes." He struggled to tell me then, but then he seemed relieved by the confession. "Who do you spy on?" I asked. Bren threw his eyebrows upward, blinked, and looked about himself. He then turned to sit next to me as we both looked into the thick jungle. "As of late, it's been pretty hard to tell," Bren said. The sun began to dip, and as the fireflies danced, we watched them for some time. Bren then sighed and said, "Look, I can't take you with me, Joshua. It is a long, hard journey. I'm sorry. My mission—" I understand," I interrupted. "You have to take care of Medea." "Right, exactly," Bren agreed. "But I know of a way to convince your brother to help us to get to the east." The next day we rode to central Archaea. Days earlier, the master dispatched Banwido and Sasajeda to confirm for Minot the rumors of the mysterious white man and to request an audience with the Ta. Minot Ta was told an offering would be made. Upon receiving word that Minot would see Bren Edgewood, we traveled to Archaea, Bren riding his own Mera, a large black beast with gray horns the master requested for him. We set out westward toward Archaea, descending deeply into the jungles to familiar trails that would lead us there. However, we rode a more southerly route to avoid any war parties traveling to the north gate entrances to Archaea. We circled around and approached the southern entrance. As we entered the surrounding towns, Bren attracted many eyes. Word of his presence traveled quickly, and many followed us for 15 miles to catch a glimpse of the exotic white man before we reached the royal gates. Kuba rode out to us. He could not disguise his happiness to see me, nor I to see him.
Who is this guy?
He took in the sight of Bren with great curiosity. I said, "Kuba, this is Bren Edgewood, from the land of Bane.
This guy.
Bren extended a hand to Kuba, who did not know how to respond.
Ears, man.
He's white like a ghost! He marveled in his usual uncouth manner, ignoring the extended hand.
You feed him some beef, man. He's anemic. But would you just take his hand into yours?
Kuba then gripped Bren's hand, and Bren enthusiastically shook it. Kuba? Bren nodded.
God.
My brother laughed at his oddness, then asked,
Does he got any of that weed that Darlene was talking about?
You can ask him yourself. I laughed.
Oh, you mean he understands me?
Kuba, goofy as always, asked.
Yeah, he understands you, Goddess. I'm afraid I don't understand a word you're saying, Kuba. I'm a bit deaf, you know. You might have to speak louder, slower, said Bren, half in Kwa and half in Khoorhani, and handing a cigar over to Kuba.
Kuba turned dark with embarrassment, and then he began to laugh hysterically. We all laughed as Bren lit cigars, one for Kuba and one for himself. Glad to meet you, Kuba. Well, here's to cleaner living, Bren muttered, taking up his reins and taking a puff. Together, we rode deeper into Archaea, to the royal estates. The warmth of familiarity charmed my heart as once again I took in Archaea, its sprawling green valley, as seen from the heights of my father's estate. There were many armed divisions, in formation and making ready for the imminent attack on Archaea's fence. Then I saw the deep green hill of the estate, its flattened sections and the outcropping structure of the Dij and royal palace. As we approached, we were met by servants and guards. We were taken inside, but first Bren was shown that he must remove his boots when entering the council room. Reluctantly, he did so. He obviously did not trust a servant girl with his precious footwear. Hey! He shouted after her. It's okay, Bren. She will give them back. At least 2 heads taller than us, his blue gaze taking in the surroundings, he was nevertheless like a lost child as he followed us. He was sweating from the great heat and humidity, his skin flushed red. He stared at everything, the stonework of my father's Dij, the engravings on the vine-covered stone walls, the fields, the great fence and stone towers in the distance as seen through the passing openings, the nakedness of the women servants who flocked to him, offering him water and fruit, the monkeys being run off by other servants. Finally, as we descended into the dark, cavernous Dij along a torch-lit hall, Bren stared at the great numbers of warriors who were gathered in the smoky parlors of my father's courtroom, now my brother's. We passed the old stone statues of Tiaga, the tiger goddess, and into the large parlor of ceramic floor tiles with multicolored carpets over them, countless attendants seated on them. There were 3 chairs now where my father's one jade and ivory bench once stood. In the center sat Minot. To his left, Tomak, my uncle, and to his right, Minot's wife, Jaya. Minot stood up upon sight of me, grinning. Tomak seemed stoic. I went to Minot, moved to bow as I would the Ta, but he prevented it. He quickly took me by the shoulders and looked at me. His eyes were lined, his hair braided with gold. He embraced me and kissed my cheek. Jeshibian, brother, welcome home, he said, his grin strong and splendorous. I'm so happy to see you, Minot. Despite the times, you look well, I said. I introduced Bren, who bowed to the Ta in his manner, a sweeping gesture of his arm before him and bending one leg. This seemed to amuse Minot, who nodded in acknowledgement. "Ah, welcome, Bren Edgewood," said Minot, and he motioned for servants to fetch cushions. The court was full, the lords still loyal to Archaea, all present, with the exception of Lord Dajai, who still fought fiercely in the east, as Minot explained to me. They were all curious to see this pale man, to hear what he had to say and what he had to offer. Minot seemed changed, the crown upon his head worn reluctantly. Tomak sat to Minot's left as his chief advisor, his wife, Jaya, also his trusted advisor. "Did it not frustrate you that Suan, our mother, the Tass, never had a chair set for her in court?" Minot asked. "It certainly did me." Minot looked back at his beautiful wife. Things had changed. The metaphor of Paen sending away the old ways came to mind. We expressed grief for our brother's death, spoke about the impending attack from Botage, and as 2 cushions were provided for us, Bren and I took a seat. "Now, what is it you wish to request, Jeshibian?" Minot asked. "In Kosi," I began, only to be met with an eye roll from Minot. Brother," I restarted. We need a traveling party. Guides and at least 50 men." Tomak burst into laughter. Minot looked at him angrily. "Could you... traveling party to where?" he asked. East, to the plains," I said. "To Bergnest." I botched the translation. Bren shook his head as Minot said, "Bergnest, I've never heard of such a place." "Your Grace," Bren spoke. "Forgive me, but Mountain Nest is a fort, a station." His subtle correction seemed to indicate that to speak unclearly before royalty was not acceptable. "I don't care if it's the next town down," Tomak protested. "Archaea's about to be sacked and you ask us for warriors?" "Jeshibian, Tomak is actually right. I cannot do this. The stakes are remarkably high." I know, brother. I'm aware of this, but perhaps if you listen to our offer." Tomak laughed again. "You are too much of a dreamer, young Jeshoya."
"Perhaps he's brought his magic sword,"
a voice muttered, and the whole room exploded into laughter.
"Silence!"
Minot yelled. He sat on the edge of his chair.
"I will not have anyone disrespect this man. Have you forgotten? He is a devotee of Paen, and an heir to this very throne."
"We should at least see what he has to offer," Jaya said. Minot nodded in agreement. Tomak sighed and pushed back into his seat. "So," Minot gestured. I nodded to Bren, who rose and unsheathed his pistol, the G-Riot. "With my lord's permission," he said to Minot as he pointed to his target, the statues in the hallway beyond the room. The posted guards scattered out of the way at my behest. Minot nodded. "I've always hated those statues." "Brother, we offer you better firepower," I said, and then Bren pulled the trigger. The explosive projectile shattered the sculptured rock, then he fired again, the round blasting a deep crater into granite. Many warriors in the room bolted and shocked as the third blast tore the granite through, sending large chunks of it into the air and onto the floor. The one statue was obliterated, a crater left in the wall behind it. All this with 3 shots, brother, I said, setting it up, as Bren would call it. The blasts were deafening, our ears ringing, and the hall thick with dust. All eyes were wide with shock and awe of the destructive power. Tomok, greatly impressed, moved to the edges of his seat almost hungrily as Bren bowed and again took aim. Mina quickly stood up. No, wait! But it was too late, for Bren emptied the rest of the G-Riot's ammunition clip, destroying the remaining statue and leaving the hall with large chunks of rubble on the floor. I do not hate them that much. Minot lamented for the twin tigers, shocked that they vanished completely by way of the small pistol. He shook his head in disbelief. How about a statue of Ashuta then, love? Jaya joked. Bren, while walking toward the Ta, cleared the chamber and, handle first, safely placed the weapon into Minot's hands, sealing the deal, as he put it. For 1,000 of these, brother, I offered to Minot. Yes! Tomok shouted and the hall erupted with laughter. Even Minot laughed. You want safe passage, guides, and 50 warriors in return for 1,000 of these nasty little beauties? He asked, examining it thoroughly before passing it to Tomok, who then passed it to Jaya, who then handed it back to Bren. No, I offer 500 for 50 warriors. If you throw in 700 pounds of gold, I'll throw in the other 500, Bren said, driving his bargain hard. He flipped his weapon around to show off its many attractive qualities. A flash in his eyes, one eyebrow cocked, he then slipped it into his shoulder holster. Tomok never stopped nodding his head, at which Minot grinned, and he agreed. Seems you have Uncle Tomok's interest after all, Minot joked, to which Tomok kept nodding. Very interesting.
Very interesting indeed.
Bren, so viel Gold wir uns belasten, und Makarian, I said, shocked by his altering the proposal. Everyone will have their eyes on it the whole way.
I said this entirely in Banish, fully articulate, and though he was a bit stunned, Bren replied, I realize that, but it's necessary. Trust me, we're going to need it, Bren said plainly. What is the problem? Minot asked. In Kosi, Bren said, Mountain Nest is an armory of sorts. They will deliver me these weapons, but I will need this much gold to convince them to part with a higher-end stock. You see, they are engaged in a war as well. For years, Mountain Nest has sold weapons to the plainsfolk, but only from their stockpile of most ancient weapons, which are traded to gain certain political leverage with them. I see, Minot said. I believe the Mayok are using weapons from those stockpiles. These pistols, as you see, are state-of-the-art, and so are costly. As for the gold, your brother's right, rightly concerned. No doubt bandits might, say no more. We will send you with 200 men. Now, I have your word that these arms will be traded then. Bren bowed and said, I guarantee it. I was impressed and almost disturbed. I could see then that information about him, who he was, and what he was involved with, came with a price. I felt used, manipulated, the bargaining chip for gold and security. I did not know what to think about this Bren in that moment. That evening, there was a celebration in the palace, much feasting and wine. Bren was made at home and slapping the backs of warriors gathered about him. He bellowed along in laughter, coughing clouds of smoke, negotiating his way about the crowds, and always protective of his wares, mind you. He passed out his cigars and produced another lighter from his pockets. He charmed them all, even sang Khoorhani songs with them. Suddenly, all of his sophistication seemed to reveal itself as the exploitive weaponry of the adventurer. Minot's guests were lost in the insane drumming and chanting within the smoke-filled courtroom and halls of the royal home, which were packed with writhing, sensuous forms dancing in circles as if rubbing the cure of celebration into their beings. I watched the insanity from a distance, from the corridors that peered into chambers, keeping my eye on Bren. He had a woman on his lap, his hands cupping her backside, his tongue mingling with hers. An angry warrior snatched her away, unsheathed his sword, his blade firmly against Bren's neck. But with Bren already on his feet, the barrel of his weapon pushed deeply into the chest of his opponent. They glared at one another, but then broke out into drunken laughter together, embraced, and resumed their merriment. Why are you not joining in, Jeshibian? A voice called from behind me. It was Minot.